So, if you were to survey the endless, overflowing aisles of modern self-help literature today, you would inevitably find this vast constellation of books telling you exactly how to live a perfectly balanced life.
Oh, absolutely. It's like a massive industry built on that exact premise.
Right. And they sell you this dream of a completely frictionless existence. You're supposed to get 8 perfect hours of sleep, maintain a flourishing social circle, eat a pristine diet, have these mindful mornings, and hold down a flourishing career.
And it all has to be perfectly compartmentalized, right? Like little boxes you just neatly check off every single day.
Exactly. But what they completely fail to tell you is that almost every single individual who has fundamentally altered the trajectory of human history, from the pioneers of early computing to the scientists who unlocked the secrets of radiation, they lived incredibly unbalanced lives.
Yeah, totally unbalanced, jagged, utterly obsessive lives.
Right. So today we are basically taking a sledgehammer to that modern myth of balance. We're doing a complete analysis of why it's actually holding you back.
And honestly, it is a necessary demolition. What's so fascinating here is that we have somehow collectively agreed that a comfortable, predictable equilibrium is like the highest form of human achievement.
Yeah, it's wild. We really put it on a pedestal.
We do. And in the process, we have completely pathologized the very intensity that actually drives progress. I mean, we treat obsession like it's a disease to be cured.
Right, rather than the raw fuel you actually need to escape the gravity of mediocrity.
Exactly.
So to really ground this, I want to offer an analogy. If you were to walk into, say, a master mechanic's workshop, you might see one of those absolutely pristine, meticulously organized toolboxes.
Oh, yeah, like the ones where every single wrench has its exact foam-cut slot.
Yes, exactly. The metal's all polished and gleaming, and sitting right there in the center, maybe resting on a velvet cloth, is this tightly wound, heavy-duty industrial spring.
Right, a total masterpiece of engineering.
Yeah. And what is that spring actually designed to do?
Well, it's entirely loaded with tension. I mean, by its very design, it is meant to compress, to absorb shock, and to release a massive magnitude of kinetic energy the absolute moment it's unleashed.
Okay, right. So let's really unpack this, because here's the profound tragedy of that specific image. Because the mechanic wants to keep the toolbox looking perfect, that spring never actually gets used.
It just sits there.
It just sits there in that completely balanced, perfectly climate-controlled environment. And slowly, over the passage of eras, it just begins to succumb to entropy.
It starts to rust.
Exactly, it begins to rust. The immense tension is still trapped inside of it, literally screaming to be released, but the physical structure itself is quietly, invisibly decaying.
Wow. Yeah.
And honestly, when I consider that image, I don't just see a piece of metal. I mean, I see us. I see you, the listener, sitting right where you are, right at this exact moment.
It's the ultimate visual representation of the modern human condition. I mean, we are so completely obsessed with remaining pristine.
Right. We want the aesthetics of success.
Yes, exactly. We are obsessed with maintaining this beautiful, culturally approved arrangement of our lives, even while our vital creative energy is just quietly rusting away in the dark.
So, I want you to introduce yourself for a moment.
Yeah.
You're sitting at a desk right now. You are surrounded by a vast constellation of notes, grand plans, half-finished projects, and unlaunched ideas.
Yeah, the classic graveyard of potential.
Right. You are striving with every fiber of your being to build something extraordinary, yet you are trying to do it perfectly. You're desperately trying to balance your friendships, your physical health, your passive digital entertainment, and your towering ambition.
You're trying to be everything to absolutely everyone while simultaneously conquering your entire field.
And what is the actual biological and psychological result of that impossible balancing act?
It's definitely not power. The result is total, complete paralysis.
Yes, instead of feeling like an undeniable force of nature, you feel entirely frozen. You watch others, people who clearly possess a mere fragment of the knowledge you hold, effortlessly pass you by.
They just step out into the arena and take these wild, uncalculated swings.
Right. And they claim massive victories. Meanwhile, you feel like your energy is just bleeding out into a dark void. You are perpetually busy, your calendar is totally overflowing, but you are entirely stagnant.
Because you are busy managing the rust, you are not actually releasing the spring. And that is the core tension we really need to shatter today.
Absolutely. The mission for our conversation is to systematically dismantle the comforting illusions that keep that spring trapped in the box.
We are setting out on a really intense intellectual exploration today. We're going to destroy the myth of perfect preparation once and for all.
Yes, and we're going to uncover the raw, unfiltered neurobiology of obsession, the undeniable advantage of momentum, and, the mechanical power of taking aggressive action in the dark.
So, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the very things we are taught to value in our modern era, caution, extreme self-awareness, endless preparation, and harmonious balance, they are actually the exact mechanisms keeping us trapped.
Right, we're taught that these are the ultimate virtues of a mature adult.
Exactly. But in the context of creating something that fundamentally alters the fabric of your reality, these so-called virtues just function as a governor on an engine.
Oh, I love that analogy. Can you explain how a governor works on an engine, just for those who might not be mechanically inclined? Because it perfectly maps to human ambition.
Sure. So a governor is this mechanical or electronic device installed in an engine specifically to limit its maximum speed.
Okay, so it physically stops it from going too fast.
Right. It literally starves the engine of fuel or air the moment it tries to cross a certain threshold of revolutions per minute. And it's installed for safety. It ensures the engine doesn't run so hot that it damages itself.
Right, right.
While our modern cultural obsession with a well-rounded life acts as a psychological governor.
Wow. So the moment you start accelerating toward your absolute highest potential,
The moment you start getting uncomfortably obsessed, the cultural governor kicks in.
you start feeling guilty.
Exactly. You start worrying about your social life. You start worrying if you are working too hard. And so you naturally throttle back. You starve your own ambition of fuel just to stay within the safe, acceptable speed limit of the crowd.
Man, that is so true. So what does this all mean for the concept of balance? Because everywhere you look, balance is the ultimate buzzword.
It is everywhere.
It sounds incredibly noble. It sounds reasonable.
Yeah.
But the core argument we are confronting right now is that if you're trying to build something truly extraordinary, balance is just a lie.
It is the great deception of our era. A balanced life is an illusion sold specifically to keep people comfortable, predictable, and, frankly, manageable.
Manageable. That's a heavy word.
But it's true. Think about literally any pioneering figure from the distant past. Consider the scientists who lock themselves in laboratories for a massive fraction of their lives.
Right. Exposing themselves to dangerous elements just to understand the nature of atoms.
Exactly. Or consider the early innovators of aviation who risked their physical lives daily. Were they balanced? Not for a single moment. They were jagged.
Jagged. That is the perfect word for it. They were the exact opposite of a perfect circle.
Because a perfect circle is closed, it's smooth, it has absolutely no edge.
Right, and you cannot cut through the friction of reality without a sharp edge. The people who genuinely changed the world gave things up. They disappointed people.
They missed the casual gatherings. They totally ignored the trivial correspondence.
And they said no a vast magnitude of times more than anyone else because they possessed a singular vision that mattered infinitely more than public approval.
And this brings us to what we can legitimately diagnose as the disease of balance. When you attempt to be perfectly balanced, what you are actually doing on a cognitive level is fracturing your own attention.
You're splitting yourself into pieces.
Right. You split your identity into a multitude of competing roles. You try to be the flawless professional, the ever-present confidant, the ideal family member, the visionary creator.
And you end up pouring a tiny, highly diluted fragment of your cognitive processing power into each of those cups.
Exactly. And the result is that your vital force is completely scattered. You become a mile wide and a fraction of an inch deep.
You just feel like you are leaking, You feel like parts of you are everywhere except exactly where you were standing.
That's a great way to put it.
But I have to push back here, genuinely, because I hear what you were saying about these historical anomalies, these obsessive geniuses. But isn't a well-rounded life the ultimate goal for a healthy human being?
It's what we're taught, sure.
Right. I mean, we are constantly warned by medical professionals, by psychologists, by our own families, that a lack of balance leads directly to utter collapse.
The burnout warning.
Exactly. We are told we need a harmonious equilibrium, otherwise we will burn out, destroy our adrenal systems, and just ruin our lives. So are you seriously suggesting burnout is a myth?
No, burnout is absolutely real, but we fundamentally misunderstand what actually causes it. We always assume burnout is caused by working too hard on a singular passion.
Right, that's the standard assumption.
But neurobiologically, genuine burnout is far more often the result of chronic, low-level stress caused by task switching, cognitive dissonance, and a lack of meaningful progress.
Wait, hold on, say that again. Burnout isn't from working too hard.
Usually, no. If you look at the underlying mechanisms, the human brain is remarkably capable of sustaining massive amounts of effort if that effort is directed toward a singular, deeply meaningful goal where progress is highly visible.
Like the flow state.
Exactly. Think of the flow state, where you completely lose track of time. That doesn't cause burnout, it actually rejuvenates the psyche.
And it destroys it.
What destroys the nervous system is the constant frantic switching of contexts. It is the anxiety of trying to maintain 50 different plates spinning in the air.
Ah, right. All the tiny obligations.
Yeah. Modern life acts as a massive cultural sedative, padding every corner so you never feel the sharp edge of necessity, while simultaneously demanding you perform adequately in a dozen different arenas.
So we are exhausted, not because we are doing one massive thing, but because we are doing 1,000 trivial things.
Precisely. And here is the truly critical distinction. Rotting is very often mistaken for resting.
Oh, wow. Rotting is mistaken for resting. Let that sink in for a second.
It is a profound neurological confusion. You can meticulously organize your schedule, you can practice your morning mindfulness rituals, you can maintain a perfectly empty inbox, and you can still be failing at the core mission of your existence.
But because it feels like self-care, it tricks you.
Great. Because it looks like the culturally approved definition of balance, your brain does not register the existential failure, it just registers comfort. But true growth only exists at the absolute edge of discomfort.
When you are genuinely challenged, right? When you feel like the sheer pressure of your ambition is about to break you, that is when it actually counts.
That is when neural pathways physically expand. But we are terrified of the word obsession. We label it a toxic trait.
We medicate it, we counsel it away, we apologize for it constantly.
But obsession is not a toxic trait. Obsession is literally the sole antidote to the natural decay of human potential.
Like entropy.
Yes. In physics, entropy is a universal law. Systems naturally move from order to disorder unless energy is actively injected into them. Your potential is subject to this exact same law.
So if you take your eye off your mission, it will begin to rust, just like that spring in the toolbox.
Exactly. If you let one seemingly harmless distraction into your cognitive fortress, it multiplies. Soon, you are drowning in a vast ocean of harmless, trivial things. Obsession is the firewall that keeps the rust out.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because it isn't just a simple desire for comfort that paralyzes you. There is another, arguably much more insidious trap, and it is a trap that specifically ensnares the most intelligent, capable people.
Oh, the awareness trap.
Yes, it is the paralysis of self-awareness.
And this is a devastating paradox. The more intelligence, the more education, and the more self-awareness you possess, the more fiercely you hesitate.
Because you can see too much.
Exactly. Intelligence functions like a powerful, high-wattage floodlight. When you turn it on a subject, you do not just see the simple, direct path forward. You illuminate all the infinite complexities, the hidden traps, the statistical probabilities of failure.
And the vast, terrifying oceans of knowledge that you do not yet possess.
Right. It's overwhelming.
It is a curse. I think of the curve of awareness we often see in psychology. Like the absolute novice looks at a mountain and simply sees a hike. They buy a pair of boots and just start walking.
Yeah. Blissfully unaware.
But the scholar, however, looks at the exact same mountain and sees shifting tectonic plates, unpredictable microclimates, dangerous wildlife, and historical mortality rates.
Right. They see every single reason why it's a terrible idea to climb.
And because the scholar sees the immense gaps in their own preparation, they enter this perpetual cycle of planning without ever executing. They just stand at the base of the mountain, indefinitely organizing their climbing gear.
Your own mind creates an imaginary draconian gatekeeper. Because you deeply resect the complexity of your chosen field, you convince yourself there's this mystical threshold of elite mastery that you must absolutely cross before you are granted permission to even begin.
Like you need another degree or certification.
Exactly. You believe you need to read another dozen books, acquire another credential, map out another perfect strategy. But this is a delusion. This perfectionism is merely procrastination draped in heavy intellectual clothing.
It is the ultimate ego defense mechanism. I am not failing. I'm simply preparing to an elite standard.
Right, but nobody is guarding the gate.
Nobody is walking around the world with a clipboard checking your credentials before you are allowed to try. The people you think are judging your lack of preparation are entirely consumed with their own internal struggles.
And yet this phenomenon freezes the most brilliant minds. Intense study reveals immense complexity, making the deeply knowledgeable scholar feel like a total fraud.
while the absolute novice feels completely invincible.
Exactly. When you possess a microscopic amount of knowledge about a domain, your confidence is towering. You literally lack the cognitive framework to comprehend how much you're actually missing.
But as you begin to learn, your confidence plummets.
You fall right into the valley of self-doubt. You see the masters, you see the nuance, and you realize you are merely a beginner. And the tragedy is that the highly intelligent person stays trapped in that valley, endlessly preparing, trying to think their way back up to a state of perfect confidence before they act.
While the novice, still standing on that initial peak of blind, unjustified confidence, just starts running forward.
Right.
And that transition brings us to the most frustrating, reality-bending question of this entire discussion. If the highly intelligent and the deeply self-aware are framed by their own vast awareness, who is inheriting the earth?
Who is actually winning?
Right. Who is actually claiming the victories in the real world? It is the ones who move without the heavy burden of perfect clarity.
It is the people who act with a towering magnitude of blind confidence. This is the absolute reality of the marketplace of existence.
The world does not reward hidden, quiet, perfect mastery.
It doesn't. The world cannot even see it. The world rewards visible, undeniable conviction.
You look around your industry and you inevitably see people who clearly lack any deep fundamental competence claiming massive territory.
Oh, it happens constantly.
Because they are completely blind to the terrifying risks that you see so clearly, their default setting is aggressive forward motion. They do not calculate, they just conquer.
And it makes the scholar absolutely furious.
Oh, it's enraging. You watch them and you think, how are they succeeding? They don't even understand the foundational principles of what they're doing.
But the audience, the marketplace, the fabric of human society itself, it is magnetically drawn to those who appear certain. Evolutionary psychology explains this beautifully.
Oh, I love this part. Tell us about the evolutionary aspect.
Well, in the distant past, our ancestors lived in unpredictable, highly dangerous environments. If a predator approached, the tribe did not follow the individual who said, well, statistically, there are multiple avenues of escape we should analyze.
Right, they'd get eaten while analyzing.
Exactly. They followed the individual who pointed a spear and yelled, run this way. Human beings have a deep, hardwired craving for certainty. We want to follow someone who looks like they know exactly where they are going, even if that certainty is built entirely on thin air.
So the unqualified step, right onto the stage, grab the microphone and start speaking.
Yes, and here is the brutal secret. Their sheer, raw volume of unpolished action generates real-world results. And those messy results eventually build genuine, undeniable capability.
Okay, I want to use an analogy here to really cement how this works mechanically. Imagine navigating a massive ancient labyrinth.
Okay, a labyrinth.
The intellectual, the scholar, sits at the very entrance of the maze. They have a drafting table, a compass, and an array of complex tools. They are trying to draft a flawless, mathematically perfect map of every twist, every turn, and every potential dead end before they take a single step inside.
Because they want a guarantee of safe passage.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, the wildly overconfident novice arrives, completely ignores the drafting table, and just runs headfirst into the maze, sprinting at full speed.
Exactly. And yes, the novice hits dead ends, they slam into walls, they scrape their knees, they had to double back a massive number of times.
But they're moving.
Right. Because they are moving at such an aggressive velocity, they're constantly gathering real-time data, they are mapping the labyrinth with their own bruises, they are physically touching the walls.
And inevitably, through sheer chaotic momentum, they stumble upon the exit while the intellectual is still sitting at the entrance, sharpening their pencil.
It's so true.
This raises an important question for you, the listener. Are you the map maker or are you the runner? Because you cannot prepare your way into confidence.
Right. Confidence isn't just an emotion.
No, it's not a warm, glowing emotion that descends upon you from the heavens after you have read a sufficient number of books. Confidence is a heavy, iron weapon that you must physically forge in the fires of action. You must literally act your way into clarity.
Let's talk about the biological mechanism behind that, because it isn't just poetry. When you say act your way into clarity, what is actually happening in the brain?
We are talking about the physical process of myelination. Every time you take an action, a neural circuit fires in your brain. When you are just thinking about taking action, the signal is incredibly weak.
Like a faint whisper.
Exactly. But when you physically execute a task, even messily, the brain recognizes that this pathway is being actively utilized. In response, it begins to wrap those specific nerve fibers in a fatty substance called myelin.
And myelin acts like insulation on an electrical wire, right?
Precisely. It dramatically increases the speed and efficiency of the electrical signals. You literally cannot think your way into a thick myelin sheath. It only forms in response to repeated physical execution.
So the novice running through the maze is actively myelinating their neural pathways based on real-world feedback.
Yes, they are building rapid reflexes and intuitive understanding. The map maker is not.
Manufacturing certainty through sheer volume. This is a terrifying concept for the perfectionist. I mean, we are talking about the absolute necessity of starting messily.
It's mandatory.
We are talking about deliberately releasing your work, your ideas, your art, your business into the unforgiving public arena long before it is polished. You have to be willing to look incredibly foolish.
Because an unbroken chain of messy, chaotic, imperfect actions will always, without fail, conquer a solitary, isolated spark of theoretical perfection.
The perfectionist hoards their potential, right?
Yeah.
Keeping it pristine, waiting for a flawless debut that literally never arrives.
While the executor spills their potential everywhere, learning from the stain it leaves.
But the fear of embarrassment is so visceral. It feels like physical pain. It feels like a threat to our literal survival. When we think about launching something that is only half-baked, every single instinct screams at us to hide.
And that is exactly the instinct you must consciously override. The psychological tax of embarrassment is real, but hiding from embarrassment is fundamentally hiding from growth.
And this ties back to the evolutionary aspect again.
Oh, entirely. Social rejection used to mean death in the distant past. If the tribe laughed at you, you were cast out into the wilderness to die. Your brain still processes a messy public failure as a literal death threat.
So the panic is biological.
Yes, but if you are not feeling exposed, if you are not feeling a profound sense of vulnerability regarding the rawness of your output, you are playing a game so incredibly small, it does not even register on the scale of your true capability.
Visibility creates an immense necessary pressure. You have to let the unyielding marketplace of reality shape you.
You step into the arena not because you are certain you will win, but because the very physical act of fighting forces your nervous system to adapt. It forces you to myelinate and to become someone capable of winning.
Okay, let's unpack how we actually execute this transition. We've established that the rust must be shaken off, that the concept of a balanced life is often a sedative, and that raw, messy momentum builds actual neural pathways.
Right.
But to transition from a paralyzed thinker into an unstoppable force, you cannot just slap a few new aggressive habits on top of your current comfortable life.
No, that never works.
You cannot simply add a new layer of hustle to a foundation built on distraction. And this brings us to a phase that is intensely uncomfortable. We are entering what we call the violent ritual of subtraction.
It is vital to understand the word violent here, not as physical aggression, but as a sudden, undeniable disruption of your entrenched patterns.
So it's not a gentle phase out.
Yeah. Not at all. Subtraction is not a polite, gentle reorganization of your digital calendar. It is not moving a few appointments around or doing a light spring cleaning of your desk. It is a ruthless severing of deadwood.
It requires a mindset completely devoid of nostalgia.
Zero nostalgia. Zero guilt. If you want to change your trajectory, you have to systematically destroy the safety nets, the comforting routines, and the endless distractions that are currently keeping you anchored to your previous identity.
Wait, I have to challenge this heavily, genuinely.
Go ahead.
You are talking about aggressively cutting things and people out of your life. That sounds incredibly dark, isolating, and frankly, a bit sociopathic. What about the richness of human experience?
I hear this a lot.
I mean, I have a family. I have friends I have known for a massive portion of my life. Are you seriously suggesting I abandon my long-term connections and my support network just to build a startup or write a book? Isn't there a huge danger of becoming a machine, completely devoid of humanity?
That is the most common and vital objection. But let's clarify what subtraction actually means in practice. The fear you are describing is just the voice of the rusted spring wanting to stay comfortably in the familiar box.
Okay, explain that.
We are not talking about abandoning your children or becoming a hermit. We are talking about the neuroscience of social contagion and cognitive load.
Social contagion.
Right. The unvarnished truth is, if you insist on keeping every casual acquaintance, Every passive group chat, every comfortable but stagnant routine, and every meaningless invitation, your energy will be so completely diluted that you will never generate the concentrated heat required to forge anything of lasting value.
So it isn't about cutting off love, it's about cutting off the endless, slow drip of trivial obligations.
Precisely. It is about establishing boundaries. Human beings possess mirror neurons. Our brains are literally hardwired to mimic the emotional states, the ambitions, and the habits of the people in our immediate proximity.
So if you hang around stagnant people, you become stagnant.
Exactly. If your broad social circle is dedicated to trivial complaints, passive entertainment, and a shared unspoken agreement to never demand greatness from one another, they act as heavy iron weights chained directly to your ankles.
You cannot swim toward the surface while they're comfortably resting on the ocean floor, holding on to you.
It's the classic crab bucket mentality.
Right, if one crab tries to climb out, the others pull it back down.
Uh-huh.
Not necessarily out of malice, but because the escape threatens their reality.
Exactly. When you establish these new, terrifying boundaries to protect your focus, expect resistance. Expect your casual friends to accuse you of changing, of becoming obsessed, of thinking you are suddenly superior.
And you just have to accept that.
You must be willing to love them from a distance. Distance is often the most profound form of mercy you can offer both yourself and them. You become the villain in their temporary narrative, so you can become the architect of your own reality.
Wow. That requires a merciless audit of every single drain on your vitality. Let's break these down, starting with the most pervasive and destructive, the digital arenas.
Oh, the digital arenas are brutal.
Our devices, our applications, the entire modern digital infrastructure. These are not neutral tools sitting passively waiting to be used. They are aggressively engineered behavioral modification machines.
They are literal slot machines designed by behavioral psychologists. Every chime, every buzz, every visual notification operates on a variable interval reward schedule.
Break that down, the variable interval part.
Sure. Early behavioral researchers discovered that if you give an animal a reward every single time it presses a lever, it eventually gets bored. It knows what to expect.
Right.
But if you give it a reward randomly, maybe on the first press, maybe on the 50th, the animal will press the lever obsessively until it collapses.
And our applications are built on this exact mechanism.
Yes, you pull down to refresh the feed, and you do not know if you will get nothing or if you will get a massive hit of social validation.
And they are draining your life force drop by microscopic drop.
Right.
You believe you were just taking a momentary break, a quick glance to stay connected. I'll just check this for a minute.
But it's never a minute.
No. Let's talk about the mechanism of attention residue, because this blew my mind. It proves that a quick glance is a biological impossibility.
Attention residue is a cognitive phenomenon where your brain cannot instantly switch between tasks.
Right.
When you are deep in focused work and you stop to glance at a notification or read an email, your visual field moves back to your work. But a substantial fraction of your brain's processing power remains stuck on the email you just read.
It's like leaving a browser tab open in your brain.
Exactly. It takes a significant portion of an hour for the brain to fully clear that residue and return to a state of deep focus.
So if you check your device just once every half hour, you are literally never, ever experiencing your brain's full cognitive capacity.
Never. You are operating with a permanent cognitive handicap.
That is terrifying.
It is. To truly enter the state of obsession, the digital chimes of this hollow validation must be silenced completely. Not minimized, not managed with a polite app timer. Silenced.
The device must be physically removed from your proximity for an unbroken span of hours. You have to starve the behavioral addiction.
And when you starve that addiction, the withdrawal is visceral. You will physically reach for a phantom device in your pocket. Your skin will crawl. That is how you know it was a looch.
But the audit doesn't stop at the digital world or casual relationships. It goes internal. Let's talk about physical maintenance.
This is often completely ignored.
Right. We often treat our bodies as an afterthought in intellectual pursuits. We treat them like a meat vehicle designed merely to carry our brilliant brains from one meeting to another.
Which is a catastrophic biological misunderstanding. The brain is the most energy-hungry organ in the human body. A weak physical vessel inherently creates a fragile, easily distracted mind.
So you can't outthink a bad diet.
No, food and rest are not luxuries. They are not rewards for a hard day's work. They are the absolute baseline fuel required for cognitive dominance.
Let's talk about sleep, for example. The hustle culture narrative used to be sleep when you're dead.
It's the worst advice possible.
Right. The biology of sleep proves that Sacrificing it actually destroys your ability to do the deep work we are talking about.
Absolutely. During deep sleep, your brain activates the glymphatic system. Think of it as a biological power wash for your neural pathways.
A power wash for the brain.
Exactly. It physically flushes out the metabolic waste, the toxic byproducts that accumulate during intense cognitive effort. If you compress your sleep to work longer, that waste builds up.
It just sits there.
Yes. Your neurons literally cannot fire efficiently through the sludge. You experience it as brain fog, lack of willpower, and emotional fragility.
So you must defend your physical vitality with the exact same ruthless aggression you use to defend your isolated focus time.
Yes. And then there is the constant suffocating blanket of media and background noise.
Oh, the noise.
The overwhelming majority of consumed information, the endless visual feeds, the speculative commentary is pure, meaningless static.
It is someone else's agenda, filling the silent spaces where your own original thoughts should be taking root. We use this noise to drown out the terrifying silence of our own unfulfilled potential.
Total silence must be actively cultivated. You have to learn to sit in a quiet room and just listen to your own mind.
And what is truly insidious alongside the media noise are the micro-commitments.
Yes, the micro-commitments.
These are the polite favors, the vague agreements to catch up soon, the endless exploratory meetings that have no clear agenda. These micro-commitments act as invisible leeches on your mental RAM.
There is a psychological term for this, right? The phenomenon of open cognitive loops.
Yes. Can you explain how those loops work?
The brain has a profound tendency to remember uncompleted or interrupted tasks better than completed ones. Every time you say yes to a vague commitment, you open a cognitive loop.
So it's constantly running in the background.
Exactly. Even when you are not actively thinking about it, a background process in your brain is keeping that loop active, consuming energy.
If you have dozens of these open loops, unanswered favors, pending social obligations, your processing power is just decimated.
It's ruined. If an opportunity or a request is not an absolute, undeniable necessity for your ultimate mission, it must be slaughtered without a second thought. Close the loop. Say no.
So you endure this violent subtraction. You eliminate the digital slot machines. You distance yourself from the stagnant social anchors. You optimize your physical vessel. You kill the background noise, and you slaughter the micro-commitments to close the cognitive loops.
You clear the board.
Right. But when you finally burn away all these cheap thrills and the constant roar of the world, a terrifying massive void opens up in the center of your life. The quiet is truly deafening.
And here's where it gets incredibly dangerous, but also incredibly powerful.
Because that restless, hungry human energy, that desperate biological need for stimulation, it doesn't just disappear. It remains. And it must be directed.
This is the critical pivot point of the entire journey. We call this the alchemy of obsession, or switching the supply.
Switching the supply. I love that.
Human neurochemistry fundamentally craves stimulation. We are constantly hunting for a change in state, for a surge of feeling, driven by our dopamine system.
So when you violently eliminate the endless streams of passive, easy entertainment, your mind does not suddenly become a peaceful sanctuary of Zen meditation.
No, it becomes desperate. It begins to starve.
I want to use an analogy that really captures this feeling.
Yeah.
Have you ever been inside a sensory deprivation chamber? The float tanks.
I have. It is a profound, almost jarring experience.
Right. You get into the tank, the water is exactly the temperature of your skin, they close the heavy lid, and suddenly there's absolutely zero input. No light, no sound, no feeling of gravity.
Total sensory wipe.
Yes. And at first, the lack of input is purely agonizing. Your brain, which is accustomed to processing thousands of stimuli a second from your smartphone and your environment, starts panicking.
It searches desperately for anything to latch onto.
Exactly. People sometimes even hallucinate colors or sounds because the brain is generating its own input to fill the void. But if you endure that initial panic, if you just wait out the withdrawal, something incredible happens.
The baseline shifts.
Yes. Soon, the absolute faintest sound, the rhythmic, mechanical beating of your own heart becomes a profound, booming symphony. It becomes the only reality.
That is a flawless analogy for the neurobiology of focus. By removing the cheap, easily accessible dopamine from your environment, You do not become a less addicted organism.
You simply lower your dopamine baseline.
Exactly. You starve the brain of cheap input so that it is forced to find its necessary high in the raw, unpolished output of building your vision. You become both the sole architect and the sole consumer of your own progress.
So the itch that used to drive you to check a social feed 100 times a day is still there? The nervous energy hasn't vanished at all.
No, but now, because there are no slot machines around, that itch drives you to solve the complex problem sitting on the desk in front of you. You weaponize the
You
addiction.
weaponize it. That is brilliant.
The withdrawal from cheap comfort is an agonizing passage. Your skin will metaphorically crawl, but eventually, the pain of discipline, the sheer crushing weight of sustained effort, transforms into a deep, heavy, undeniable satisfaction.
The dopamine receptors actually upregulate, right?
Yes. You stop craving the fleeting sugar rush of public approval, and you begin to crave the dense, profound nourishment of solitary achievement. You build a closed-loop emotional economy where doing the hard, necessary thing is the only currency that matters to your nervous system.
So what does this actually look like in practice? What are the physical mechanics of this absolute focus? Because, we tend to romanticize focus.
Oh, we romanticize it constantly.
We imagine it as this glorious cinematic montage of inspiration with a dramatic soundtrack playing while we effortlessly paint a masterpiece or write brilliant code. But the reality is far more industrial.
True focus is not glamorous. It is a relentless rhythm of raw, profoundly boring repetition.
Focus is mechanical. It requires building a physical and mental ritual that actively signals to your nervous system the death of all other priorities.
And this relies heavily on state-dependent learning and context cues. Your brain directly associates environments with behaviors.
So if you try to work where you relax, you're fighting yourself.
Exactly. If
Yeah.
you try to do your most profound, world-changing work in the exact same chair where you watch streaming videos and scroll through feeds, your brain is constantly fighting the context cue to relax.
So you have to cross a physical threshold.
You must. You enter a specific room or you face a specific corner. You clear the visual field of any object that does not serve the mission.
And you initiate a ritual.
Right. You initiate a specific sequence of actions. Maybe it's making a specific cup of tea or putting on a specific pair of noise-canceling headphones. That ritual acts as a biological switch. It tells your brain that the rest of the world no longer exists.
And even with that perfect ritual, you still have to endure the initial resistance. I mean, every single time you sit down to do the work, there is an initial phase of stillness that will make your skin itch.
The brain rebels.
It totally rebels. Your brain will throw up every possible excuse to escape the cognitive load. Check your email really quick, get a glass of water, look out the window. Did I leave the oven on?
It is a barrage of desperate pleas from the primitive mind wanting to escape the pressure of difficult processing.
This is where understanding the mechanics of your own brain saves you. You have to recognize that resistance as a biological phantom.
Yes. If you hold the line, if you absolutely refuse to break the seal of focus for an unbroken span of time, you pass through an invisible barrier.
The friction suddenly dissolves.
It does. The agonizing effort of starting transitions into an endless, powerful tide of effortless momentum. You merge with the work.
But to reach this state consistently, there's a fundamental rule of engineering your day. And it has to do with how our willpower depletes over time.
The timing is crucial.
You must place the absolute most arduous, terrifying, complex task at the very dawn of your cycle.
You swallow the sharpest blade first thing in the morning.
Exactly. Before the world wakes up, before the inevitable chaos of existence attempts to hijack your attention, you tackle the monster.
There is a psychological concept called ego depletion. While the exact mechanisms are sometimes debated, the practical reality is that our capacity for self-control and intense cognitive exertion diminishes throughout the day as we make decisions and manage stress.
It's like a battery draining.
Exactly. If you defer the hardest task until the afternoon, it acts as a shadow over your entire day. You spend a massive amount of background energy just dreading it.
But by conquering it immediately, when your cognitive reserves are at their absolute peak, the rest of the day becomes a downhill descent.
The execution provides a massive surge of dopamine and confidence. You train yourself to endure the boring repetition until the repetition itself becomes the source of your supreme power.
This entire journey we are outlining, from the paralyzed, rusted spring sitting in the perfect toolbox, through the violent, necessary subtraction of modern comfort, and into the raw, boring neurological mechanics of weaponized obsession. it inevitably forces a profound confrontation with the nature of our own existence.
It really does.
We are finally arriving at the solitary peak of earned meaning.
If we synthesize all of these seemingly aggressive strategies, the total rejection of the balanced life, the harnessing of blind, messy momentum, the ruthless elimination of digital and social distractions, they all converge into a single, undeniable truth about human potential.
And what is that truth?
The cost of altering the fabric of reality is always paid in the exact same currency. The currency of comfort, of familiarity, and of societal approval.
You simply cannot buy extraordinary outcomes with ordinary, comfortable actions. The universe is incredibly cold and deeply transactional in this regard.
It is entirely impartial.
It does not care about your hidden potential. It does not care about your unexpressed genius or the perfectly drafted map of the labyrinths you keep locked in your desk.
It only responds to genuine, undeniable skin in the game. It demands to see what you are willing to drag to the altar and actually burn.
And this is where your perspective undergoes a massive permanent biological shift. When you initially begin to surrender the things that do not serve your ultimate vision, it feels like a painful amputation.
It feels like you are losing critical parts of your identity.
Yes. But as you ascend this peak, as your focus narrows into a blinding laser and your neural pathways physically adapt to the work, the friction of life simply vanishes.
You enter a state of transient hypofrontality.
Transient hypofrontality. Tell us what that means, because it sounds like the ultimate liberation.
It really is. It is the neurobiological definition of the flow state. Transient means temporary, hypo means reduced, and frontality refers to the prefrontal cortex.
It's the part of your brain responsible for your sense of self, your inner critic, your perception of time, and your social anxieties.
Exactly. During states of extreme obsessed focus, the brain actually downregulates activity in the prefrontal cortex. The inner critic literally goes silent.
So the agonizing voices of self-doubt and the desire for balance just turn off.
They vanish. You stop thinking about yourself and you become entirely merged with the action itself.
So it stops feeling like a sacrifice.
It ceases to be a sacrifice entirely. It no longer feels like you are agonizingly pushing a massive boulder up a steep hill. Instead, it feels like an inescapable, overwhelming gravitational pull toward your highest possible capability.
You are no longer forcing yourself to work. The momentum of the work is pulling you forward with a magnetic force.
And the things you left behind, the trivial digital noise, the stagnant relationships, the cheap thrills of the modern world, they do not seem like tragic sacrifices anymore.
They seem like heavy, absurd chains that you were finally smart enough to drop.
Precisely. Because meaning, true, unshakable, enduring meaning, is not something you simply stumble upon while wandering through a perfectly balanced, comfortable life.
No, meaning is not discovered. Meaning is a canyon that you carve out of solid rock with your own bare hands, through an endless sequence of mundane, intensely focused days.
It is the heavy, dense reality of knowing that you did not hide. You did not let the potential energy remain trapped.
You did not let the spring rust.
Right. You applied the tension, you embraced the terror of the release, and you allowed your raw force to shape the world around you.
So having mapped this entire brutal and beautiful terrain, we turn back to you. You are sitting at that desk right now. The illusions of the perfectly balanced life have been completely shattered.
The biological necessity of moving forward blindly without the comfort of perfect preparation is totally clear.
The mechanisms of raw, pure momentum have been laid bare. So the ultimate question remains, what are you willing to take from your life today, right now, and throw onto the fire?
What will you surrender?
There is relentless, echoing rhythm keeping time on your existence. The tension in the spring is immense, but the rust is always creeping in. Will you shatter the pristine toolbox, release the tension, and step fully into the arena before the final silence falls?